Now I would like to introduce Adam Mazur. Adam is an art critic, curator, also editor-in-chief. He also teaches at the University of Arts in Poznan. Adam, until recently, had been curator at Zámek Ujazdowski Center for Contemporary Art here in Warsaw, where he curated a number of exhibitions, among them new documentary, then red eye effects, missing documents, photographs of Polish transformation. So these exhibitions suggest that he is focused on documentary photography and contemporary art. He is a prolific writer, published a number of books, among them Histories of Photography in Poland, 1839 to 2009, and another book, New Phenomena in Polish Photography. He also, as I mentioned, is editor-in-chief. He was editor of the Obieg magazine, and very recently he launched a new magazine called Szum. And Adam will talk about the beginning and the end of the photography department.
Dzień dobry. Good morning. Karolina, thank you for your invitation to join this discussion. I think we are all aware here how important this is for us.
Because I was asked to do so. So I sent this paper to translators, so I hope it will be just fine for you to have the earphones. Okay?
So perhaps taking the floor after representatives of the J.P. Getty Foundation talk about Łódź of Wrocław, the situation here is completely different. What we have here is completely different. I didn't hear the comment from the audience. Microphones would be needed for comments. So I would like to quote Douglas Crimp, carry that as a motto. I'm not sure how current this is about how photography functions. This is a classical text about photography where Crimp discussed his work with what we saw just recently, Ed Ruscha's work. So where does narrative go to? Those are questions that I also find important. I'm not presenting my collection. I'm not a museum employee. I'm not a curator or administrator at the moment. I work with the collections. So things start or end either spectacularly or in a very unspectacular way, as was the case of the Łódź photography department at the museum there. It was shut down in 2008 without much noise around it. Nobody defended it. The author of that decision was Jan Suchan, who was promoted to the post of manager, and that was his decision. So now I will go on to read. Jarosław Suchan thinks that he took a right and constructive decision. The department, which was founded in 1977, was justified by him by a structural reform. We are to again see a museum as something that attracts critics and audiences. So a department of photography was anachronous, according to him. Was anachronous, and therefore it should have been cut. The dissolution of a cell of that museum was dictated by the premise that photography is art. We do no longer have a sculpture department or a performance or drawing department. Therefore, this separation would have been inappropriate. So it's a post-medium argument. This decision was supported by what we see in the Museum of Modern Art in New York, where photography is crammed in several separate rooms. In that context, MoMA, the symbolic mother of the Museum of Art, is more conservative compared to another center of that kind, the more progressive and contemporary Museum of Art in Łódź. Maybe this is disproportionate, but it boasts to be the second museum of modern art in the world. So the decision taken by my colleague, Mr. Suchan, put me in despair. Perhaps I'm chasing something that's anachronous. Maybe I overlooked the moment of historical justice where the emancipation was not decided by theory, but by practice. Urszula Czartoryska and others dreamt of that. So we are currently presenting post-medial art rather than photography, no more hierarchies. But on the other hand, maybe all this took place too quickly. Without discussion, we jumped over the stepping stone of new museology to an even newer era. What do we need a photography department today? What museum-related or ideological tasks does it apply? We do not look to that specifics in the post-media time. This text is an attempt to formulate not so much research questions, but the concept is rather a dialectic view of two leading institutions that create the canon of Polish photography. Some of you have come to Poland for the first time, so this map explains Łódź and Wrocław, where they are. The two main or leading centers, it's not Warsaw. These collections are maybe not the most voluminous, like the one of the National Museum or the one of the Museum of the History of Photography, but they are the most important ones as regards what was collected there. In Wrocław and Łódź, the most important curators worked Urszula Czartoryska, Lech Lechowicz, Krzysztof Jurewski, those in Łódź, and Henryk Derczyński and Adam Sobota in Wrocław. So I'm representing him rather than standing in for him. I'll start with Wrocław. From pictorial photography to Wunderkamera of sorts. Wrocław is a post-German city. It was populated by people exiled from Lviv and Vilnius, from former Eastern Poland. And on the ruins of Festung Breslau, they organized a new institutional and artistic life. The museum, National Museum in Wrocław, which was initially called the District Silesian Museum, it was established to replace two German musea, and it became known as the National Museum in 1970, but as of 1963, this institution has the first in Polish museology, the first separate department of photography. Until 1972, it was headed by Henryk Darczyński, who was a photographer with artistic ambitions unknown to the broader world, a founding father who we know not much about, apart from the fact that he lived a very dramatic life, an interesting biography, if storming Berlin can be termed as interesting, and then establishing a department of photography. Those are his works from the catalogue. I am using this on purpose because it is the only catalogue of a museum institution which is available only on paper, no online version in existence. So we see things like there are wonder dwarfs in the world, more artistic photographs, but also the harvest or people at work. Henryk Darczyński. Until 1972, he was the head. In 1973, he was superseded by Adam Sobota, who, until this day, is responsible for a 13,000-item collection of photography, in which we only sporadically see 19th century items, but Wrocław has the largest hoard of them. And Wrocław is concentrated on artistic photography, starting with pictorial, known as photographics in Poland, through avant-garde experiments, conceptual photography, and current works. And there are in Łódź, similarly as in Łódź, in Wrocław we have mainly Polish works, but there are also interesting post-German items. We're not certain what rights the museum has to them. So we have conceptualism or photographs of ruined elements. This is my favorite work by Johann Geppert, a very early daguerreotype of a 19th century botanist showing lice. An early item in Polish collections of German origin. Very interesting. We don't really know what to do about it. Well, the concept of the collection was initially modernist, with representative good works, acquisitions focused on unique signed works. Darczyński collected them, and then conceptualists took the upper hand, and then photoreportage and other docs emerged when Solidarity, when the Carnival of Solidarity broke out, but also works of people who were exiled from Lviv. And the counterpoint was the local history of Wrocław by Hermann Krone from Breslau, from German Wrocław. A catalogue to commemorate the 45th anniversary is a very interesting read. We can find in these 13,000 items Wrocław mosaic, like Germans, Czechs, Poles, but also many anonymous works. Adam Sobota, in his curating program, departed consciously from the modernist assumptions of Derczyński, and the lice is a nice example, but the concert on the ruins of Wrocław, photographed by Krystyna Gorazdowska, that's Herman Krona, whom I mentioned, Rembrandt's. We're talking about a third-rate photographic lab. You can find some prints. And an interesting collection by Zdeněk Tmej, including bordellos managed by Nazis during the war. Tmej was a prisoner, so this is part of that collection. And so these specific photographic, maybe not artistic works, are curiosities, like relative to Kunstkamera, has responded to the needs of a contemporary museum. Adam Sobota departs from the Polish-centric paradigm. He collects specific, not necessarily artistic photography. Those are examples of the last year's exhibitions or recent exhibitions by Adam Sobota. Unknown photographers, for example, photographing the Soviets who took Breslau, who will soon be called Wrocław, and amateur shots of the hippies from the early 80s. And now Łódź. A different story from painters avant-garde to post-media art. The Museum of Art in Łódź focused on artistic avant-garde since 1930, understood as the fine arts. So the museum was focused on drawings, paintings, and sculpture, also in following years, and photography was overlooked. Compared to New York's MoMA, to which the people of Łódź like to compare themselves, was the delayed act of founding or establishing a department of photography and visual techniques. 47 years after it was established, 37 years of delay compared to MoMA. The head of the department, Rusza Czartoryska, drew from the concepts of MoMA defined by Pontus Hulton Center, Centre Pompidou. And also video was included. The differences between what Czartoryska did compared to Sobota, she drew from constructivism and created, caught up on the backlog, and collected photography as modern art. There were 19th century factory photos. They were anonymous largely, not clearly related to modern art. She wanted to emancipate photography. At the same time, she showed perverse art, like ethnographic, sociological, documentary, advertising photography. So 10 years after she died, her department was dissolved and included into the modern art department. And then next to Leger Switters of Brandenburg, we can see 19th century artisans and photographers who sold their works for advertisements. And the husband of Czartoryska was Ryszard Stanisławski, the manager of the museum, the director, who allowed, so to say, or allowed his wife to have that department, but that was a serious decision, not necessarily personal. I think Czartoryska was a true professional, and she would have been a good choice in any setting. Czartoryska was his third wife. Alina Szapocznikow, another well-known lady, was his second wife, so that was the Polish avant-garde, where photography finds its place. Czartoryska, I think it will not be an exaggeration, is responsible for Witkacy being well-known in Poland, but she also presented Jan Buchak and Zbigniew Dłubak. So as I said, there is a canon of Polish photography. We tend to say from Buchak to Dłubak. After this decision of Jarosław Suchan, which I mentioned, the dissolution of the photographic department, there are now exhibitions taking place. I don't know if this decision was right or wrong, but what is interesting in the catalogue of the Korespondencje exhibition, which was a blockbuster, there is a strange listing where we have Bourgeois, Braque, and Buchak, and then Christo. I think that is the follow-up or the consequence of this new order. There are passages that have been invented by curators. The photography is in this practice present through these applications with Albers, Arczyński, Bocianowski. Everybody is mixed together. Delewicz next to Sophie Teuber-Up, etc. So this is a truly exceptional approach. Suchan ceased to collect photography, even though he says he's spending on photography more than the museum ever spent. He's collecting photography as modern or contemporary art, single photographs, which, according to his appraisal, are works of modern art or contemporary art. So the work of Czartoryska was within this postmodernist museum was geared to promote names. She would buy Biegański's works, when today curators are listing that name in a purely new context, in theme exhibitions like Biegański next to boys. So it's interesting, but the policy accommodates that. I wonder what the long-term consequences of that gesture are going to be, where it was decided that we depart from strictly photographic monographic exhibitions. We no longer work with dozens of thousands of photographs from our archives, but with selected works or selected artists who we have. And I will conclude with an anecdote with Klaus Kripp, who was looking at the album by Rouchet, or of Rouchet. I was at the Museum of Art, and if you know your way around, you can look into the archives of the dissolved photographic department in files, paper files. You can find Polish artists like Zofia Rydel, and I was wondering whether I am to point it out to Suchan that these are masterpieces of avant-garde work. But then I decided that maybe I shall behave like Douglas Crimp and leave it in the file. Maybe it should lie there in the file. Maybe it's the best context where photographs should find their way back to the library of a non-existent photographic department. Thank you.